hand up if you've ever had to do something that made you feel uncomfortable. Put your hand down. No, keep it up. Put your hand down if it turned out that it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be. Put your hand down if, even though it was uncomfortable, some good came out of it. Remember that this morning. There is not a hand up now. Okay? This morning is different. It'll make you uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable. Okay? It is what it is. I'm going to tell you a story this morning. And yes, I have got some props and I don't know where to put them. There and there will do. I'm going to tell you a story this morning, and I'm sure that before very long you'll know exactly where in the Bible this story is. Do not get out your Bible to read along. Okay? It's a story. It's not a Bible reading. Okay? Bear with me. I promise you'll be able to read the story afterwards to see if I got it right. Okay? At the end of this, I'm going to make you even more uncomfortable, and we're going to go into the hall and we're going to do some stuff around this story. Okay? But remember, when you've done it before, it's been okay. Good? All right, here we go. A very, very long time ago, there was a king who ruled over a huge area. He was very famous, and other important noble people honoured him. One time, this king held a huge feast, and it lasted for 6 months. Can you imagine eating yourself silly for 6 months? I'd like to try it. Anyway, this feast went for 6 months, and at the very end of it, he sent for his queen. She was having a party in a different place in the palace with all the ladies. Guess what? The queen refused to come. Never happened before. Guess what? How did the king react? Not happy? A little bit worse than not happy. He was really, really, really angry. So he asked some men who were wise to come along and tell him what he should do about this. And these wise men came and they said, "We think that you should get the queen out of her position and put someone else in her place that will give you the respect you deserve." And he thought that was a great idea. So then he sent some people out, as kings did, into all different parts of his kingdom to search for some young women that could be trained to be the queen he expected in today's modern era. That down well. Remember, this is a very, very, very long time ago where the king was the boss. Okay? So he sent some people out to get all these young women together, and they were trained for a year, and then he got to pick the one he liked the best. Again, we think it wouldn't happen today. So he sent out, the queens were trained, and he found one. So he took the crown off the old queen and put it on the new queen. Pardon? I'm multitasking. I can do anything. Put the crown on the new queen, made her queen. But the queen, what the king didn't know when he made her queen was that she was one of God's chosen people who was in his land because God's chosen people had been sent there in exile. If there's any big words that you don't understand, ask your parents or another kid. Probably adults could ask the kids, they probably know. So this woman was one of God's chosen people, and she was there in this kingdom as the queen, but the king didn't know who she really was because it was a secret. Shh. Her uncle was one of the king's servants, And one day he heard about a plot to kill the king. And so he told the queen about it, and she told the king. Anyway, the king, sorry, I forgot what I was doing. The king had it investigated and found out it was true. And so this man was pretty popular with the king at that point. Okay, remember that, we'll come back to that bit in a minute, all right? Meanwhile, there was another man that had wormed his way up the ranks of the nobility, and he made himself a person that the king thought he couldn't manage without, so he became the king's 2IC. And he went out, he hasn't got a hat, but he went out thinking he was pretty good, strutting his stuff around town, expecting everybody to bow to him, expecting everybody to worship him and honour him. But the uncle wouldn't do it. Why do you think that was? Why wouldn't the uncle honour this important man? Why? You might have been right, don't you? So, because he wanted to only honour God. Remember, he was one of God's chosen people. God was the one who deserved honour, not this man. So every day when this man went out, strutting his stuff, he walked past this uncle because he was part of the king's servants. And every day this man was just standing there, letting the noble go past. And so anger built up. You know what it's like when something irritates you, and it irritates you, and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up until suddenly you explode with fury. And it's really not that big a deal. It's just been going on for so long and you haven't done anything about it before now. Yeah? Well, that's what happened to this man. He built up, he built up, he built up, he built up, and he got furious about this uncle. And so he made a plot that he was not only going to have this man killed, but all of God's people. He was going to get rid of them all. Because then there'd be nobody that wouldn't honour him. So he had this plan. But the uncle found out about this, and he was very worried and concerned, and he did some stuff that showed that he was worried and concerned, and eventually word got back to the queen. So she went and met with the uncle and said, what's going on? So he told her. And the uncle said something really important to her. He said, you can't keep your secret anymore. You need to tell the king you are one of God's chosen people, and that this order that's been given is going to have you killed as well as us. So the queen was a bit worried about that. So she said to the uncle, go and tell all of God's people to fast and to pray for 3 days. I'll do the same, then I'll go to the king, be what it may. All right? So they did. After 3 days, she went to the king, not knowing if he was going to be happy with her or not, because you weren't supposed to go to the king unless he called for you. Okay? So the queen is a bit worried, but the 3 days are done. She's fasted, she's prayed, she's done everything that she could. She goes, a bit scared, a bit timid, to where the king is. And the king sees her. And he holds out a thing called a sceptre. It's like a big fancy cane. And he holds that out, which means you're safe, you can come in. So she went into the king. And he said to her, what do you want? Thinking she was going to ask him for jewels or money or more servants or something like that. Instead of answering the king's question though, she said, tomorrow night will you and that other important man come to a meal that I'm going to prepare for you? And then I promise I'll answer the question. So the king agrees, and then during the next morning, the nobleman comes because he's going to not wait until everybody's killed. He's going to kill this man today. So he comes to the king to ask for permission to kill this one particular man. And during that night, though, the king had been up reading because he couldn't sleep. Sorry, I missed this bit of the story. The king had been up reading, and he sent for this really boring book that would probably send him to sleep. But in it was a story about what the uncle had done to save the king's life. Okay? So the next morning when this nobleman comes, the king says to him, good, what should I do for someone who has saved my life, who has honoured me, has respected me, has done everything that someone could possibly do? Well, of course, this nobleman thought it was him, so he said, you should give him the cloak, one of your cloaks, and one of your horses, and have him taken through town and proclaimed for being a good person. And the king said, great idea. Go get the uncle, put a robe on him, put him on my horse, and you take him through the town. So this man who was up himself had to lead the uncle that he was planning to kill that day through town, saying, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honour. Can you imagine how he felt? Not happy now. So then that night was the banquet, and the man was pretty happy still that he was going to get to go to the banquet with just the queen and the king. Sorry, I forgot to take my hats off. Anyway, they went to the banquet, and it was at the banquet that the queen revealed that this other man had ordered all of her people to be killed, that she was one of God's chosen people, and that this man had prepared for them to be all killed. The king was not impressed because he loved his queen. And so instead of all of God's people being killed, this man was taken out and got rid of. And the uncle was brought in, and he was given everything that this nobleman had. He was given the position, the power, the wealth, everything. And then, to put the icing on the cake, the king made a new law that protected all of God's people, that allowed them to gather together, that allowed them to worship God, that said they didn't have to worship and honour people before God. That's the end of our story today. So in a minute, we're going to go into the back hall, and there's some options of things in there for you to do. If you can't find an option that you would like to do, pick the least uncomfortable option. You go to that table. We will be serving tea and coffee during this time, thanks to Sarah. So you can grab yourself a drink, sit at a table, discuss the story. Who's worked out where it's from? Who was the story? Who was the queen?
Esther.
Yeah. So if nothing else, pull out your Bible, read the book of Esther, because that was a summary of that whole book. Okay? It'll take you slightly longer than that to read the book, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Okay, let's move into the hall. Find a table. If the things aren't on your table that you want, you can pitch them from other tables. And if you need me, I'm here.